Hey everyone, it's Duncan here, back with my second season 24 review, and today's episode that I will be doing a review on is Thomas's Fuzzy Friend. Now, in my last video I reviewed Emily's Best Friend, and as you all know, if you saw it, that episode sucked, but this episode, I actually really liked it. It was actually a really good episode, hands down. Yeah, I mean, it's not perfect, but it's definitely one of the better season 24 episodes. In fact, it's by far my third favorite episode of the season. So now let's just run through what it's about real quick, just so we remember. So, just a little recap before I review the episode. So, this episode is about a lost dog that is just somehow snooping around the railway, and Thomas decided to let the dog in his cab to take it around to help it find a home. And then the dog jumped out of Thomas, and then Thomas chased it and then got into an accident. And the dog took the driver's cap, brought the cap to Sir Topham Hatt, and tried to tell him that Thomas is in trouble. And then Emily gets Thomas back on the tracks, and then Thomas goes back to Knapford Station, and little Thomas, the kid, adopts the dog. So first, we're gonna talk about the positive stuff about the episode, since this episode is mostly good. So here's what I'm gonna do in my reviews of season 24, or frankly any season I review. If the episode is mostly good, in my opinion, I start by talking about the positive stuff. But if the episode mostly sucks, kind of like Emily's Best Friend, then I start with the negatives and then do the positives last. So let's begin. So, by far, my favorite part of this whole episode was the first 2 minutes of it. The first 2 minutes was just hilarious. Like, I love how Gordon kind of got triggered when the dog kept interrupting him when he was trying to speak. And James was his typical self, of course, like teasing Gordon. And I especially loved this scene when the dog just pisses on James.
What's it doing? No, no, no!
That was hilarious. I love that scene. And I also kind of like the catchphrase of the episode, like, a railway is no place for a dog. I just like how that sounds, like saying it is pretty fun to say. Anyways, I just also like the whole plot of the episode. It's actually not too crazy or unrealistic, despite the fact that the dog was rescuing Thomas. I don't care about that, but it's just, I appreciate they didn't go too far, like have one of Ruth's crazy unrealistic inventions, or you know what I mean. But the plot of the episode just kind of fits in with the classic era a little bit. It feels like it would be a class, or it feels like a classic episode. And also, I thought it was absolutely hilarious when Annie and Clarabelle were acting like parents to Thomas, telling Thomas that dogs are a big responsibility. Just watch this scene.
What are you doing, Thomas? Engines can't have pets.
Dogs are a big responsibility.
And another thing I really liked about the episode, I was a little bit worried at first before I saw the episode. Like, I thought it would be just about, like, Thomas trying to take care of a lost dog in secret without Sir Topham Hatt knowing, and then he gets in trouble at the end of the episode, and then they had to send the dog away. But that's not the case in this episode, because in this episode, instead of portraying that story like a typical kid's cartoon would, like about a lost dog, instead, they know that a railway is a dangerous place for a dog, so they try to find it a home instead of keeping it in secret. So I really appreciate that they did that. And yes, I do love how they brought back Thomas the kid, because he was last seen in Thomas the Babysitter, or whatever that episode was called, in Series 19. And let's see, Series 19 was released on, I think, October of 2015. So that means in this episode, little Thomas would be at least 4.5 years old. And another positive of the episode, the crash scene was actually pretty decent, like compared to the other crash scenes in the season. Oh my god, they're garbage, but this crash scene is definitely the best in the season. And before we move on to the negatives of the episode, I just want to talk about one thing you guys might not understand. And honestly, I thought this was a really bad goof, like a negative of the episode at first, but once I took a closer look, it's actually part of the story, so there's nothing wrong with it at all. But at first, I thought this was a really bad goof when we see a poster of the lost dog, like the owner is trying to look for the dog, and it didn't make sense that at the end little Thomas adopts the dog when they should have looked for the owner. So let me explain. So at the beginning of the episode, we see the dog without a collar, so that means it's probably a homeless dog without a home or an owner. So later in the episode, we see that the drivers are actually the ones that's hanging up the posters to tell anyone if they've seen the dog. So It turns out the dog does not have an owner at all, and then a later scene in the episode, we see the drivers hanging up more posters in different spots. So it does make perfect sense that the family adopts the dog at the end of the episode. So anyways, now let's move to the negatives, and there's not very much because this episode is mostly good. Alright, now on to the negatives, and I only have like 1 or 2 negatives of the episode. This episode is really good otherwise, but it just didn't make sense that the dog was at Knapford, but the very next scene he was at like another station. How could the dog run like miles and miles to the next station? And also, we see this again at the end of the episode. Like, I don't know if the dog was in Emily's cab, but if he was running miles and miles to lead Emily to Thomas, then that dog has superpowers. So in summary, I give Thomas's Fuzzy Friend an 8 out of 10. It's not a totally perfect or amazing episode, but it's definitely one of the better ones of the season, as I said. So anyways, I will see you guys in the next video when I review The Great Little Railway Show. Expect that maybe in a few days or so. Anyways, see you later, guys.